in a speech made right here in New York, Farrakhan bought the story of the curse and said to be the same. He's saying with his high yellow self that he is pretty and blessed by God. And you're buying it, applauding it, and following after this con man. And you would follow him to Washington. It was an achievement. An achievement for who? Anytime you gather that many people together and fail to mention Africa, you might as well build a body and leave out the heart. No matter where your body is in this world, your political and cultural heartbeat is in Africa. You call him Italian American. He's not pleased. He calls himself Italian. He's been here 5 generations. He still says Italian. He mentioned the country of his origin. His Americanism is a given. But the country of his origin is his birthright. Why have we listened to all of this with no perception? His speech indeed was a golden opportunity. And he said nothing, put it all together. It's like a Baptist sermon. I have put Baptist sermons, recorded them, and had them transcribed. The minister is not saying nothing. Not one good sentence there. He's babbling, and once in a while he says, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. So he turns to the audience and says, do I have a witness? Witness for what? You ain't said nothing. And we let people get away with this feel-good rhetoric and run games on us and open up our pockets and put money in the collection plate and go out and say, oh, what a fine sermon. He ain't said nothing. Farrakhan is a frustrated Baptist preacher like most of the Muslims. They're angry with Christianity. Now, I challenge Farrakhan to march on the Arab embassies that has restarted the slave trade in Africa, in the Sudan, and in Mauritania. If he and the rest of the Muslims are not ready to deal with the slave trade in Africa, they're cowards and hypocrites. In the new slave trade in Africa, they're not only killing African men, they're working African women in the field in the day and using them sexually at night. Their children are being trained as prostitutes and concubines. Their young men mutilated. Africans are being driven out of Mauritania who are Muslims because they not only want this to be a Muslim country, an Arab Muslim country. Farrakhan hasn't said one word about this because he is bought and paid for by fundamentalist Arabs. And tell him to prove me wrong. Tell anybody to prove me wrong. Why, if he had nothing to say about that? And you following him like a fool to Washington. Go to Washington if you want to go to Washington. But don't go around following a faker to Washington. It's an achievement, but an achievement for what? He hadn't accounted to you for the $5 million he got from Libya. Now, let us, just for instance, 1 million men, let's guide on 1 million, although we could have been more, and each one spent at least $100. Add $100 together 1 million times. Do you know we can buy supermarkets all over this country? We have nursing homes. Nobody have to come and run our communities. I'm not a capitalist. I've never owned a car. I made a halfway decent salary as a college professor and as a writer and a lecturer. I never owned a car. I always had a fascination for shoes, so I got too many shoes. I came from sharecropper background in Alabama, and I've never disassociated myself with the working class. And I've always had some disagreement with the left, and still have it, because I think some of them are a bunch of fakers. I believe in total African liberation. But the program of the white left is no different from the program of the white right, to control by any means necessary. That's why in London recently there was 3 Pan-African meetings. I attended the all-black one because the 2 white ones want to integrate to the point of helping the African and sharing. Africa don't share anything in Europe, power-wise. I'd be willing to share with Europeans in Africa only to the extent that they're willing to share with us in Europe. I want to see in Africa as African control as Europe is European control, but not the same way. I have no problem about all governments supposed to be controlled by its people. If you don't take care of the very old, the very young, the poor, and the sick, and the needy, you have no government or anything worth being called a government at all. Now we are confronting things now. When are we going to confront Farrakhan? When are we going to confront him on the way he has addressed himself to our physical being? The whole concept of the curse wasn't in the Bible originally. It was drug in later. And whosoever drug it in and assigned it to God is a lie on God, because gods do not curse. That will make him ungodly. Now, let's go to the other faker who wrote the mission statement. There is nothing in the mission statement that is new. There's nothing in the mission statement that hasn't been said before. And yet he's selling the mission statement out of a press he found called the University of Sangaree Press. He has no knowledge of the University of Sangaree, which was a university in Timbuktu. He has no knowledge of the great intellectual age at Sangay. And yet he claims that he literally, Karinga acts as though he has rewritten the Bible and did a better job than the original writers. He has not atoned to the community for his attempt to destroy the Panther movement. He has not atoned for being a police informer. He has not atoned for the way he treated black women. And look now, the women he mistreated and mutilated were dark in complexion. Someone offered them some good, well-prepared black food, and he said he'd rather have a Big Mac with his little stubby pig-like self. He deserved a Big Mac. In Egypt, he showed absolute contempt for black people. He and his harem and his bodyguard, all on the expense of the organization, was separate on the bus, separate living quarters, ate separate, didn't associate with the rest of us, got on the bus is going to a place called Memphis, and he asked the bus driver, why must we go to Memphis? What's there to be seen? That proved he is ignorant of African history. Memphis was the world's first metropolis before Giza. They tore down most of Memphis to build some of the other cities. And he asked, what's in Memphis? He goes to one of the sacred temples. Now we who go to Egypt a lot know that certain things we do not do because out of respect. He goes to the Holy of Holies. This is the prayer room of the Pharaoh, the God Pharaoh, the God King or God Pharaoh. This is the prayer room where the Pharaoh, dressed in special clothing, oils himself, even removes all of his pubic hairs so he can be totally sanitized, and sets in praise not only for himself, but praise for the nation. We make a special point of never going inside of these rooms out of respect for these ancient Africans who had great spirituality long before some foreigner, baker, and fool found something called religion. Karinga goes in there with his shoes on and with one of the women of his harem pose for a picture, to have his picture taken. Now you're going to follow this man who's shown utter contempt for African people. Follow him where? In Senegal, he got a lot of dandruff because I was elected head of the American group. The Senegalese who know that I've related to the Francophone community more and better than any African in the whole of the Western world, and contributed more to their publications over the years, didn't think it was necessary to consult anyone to elect me head of the group. Karinga is now having a fit about it, and we arrived at the next assignment. He came over to me and said that I did not know the definition of his name. MULATA means God. And he resented the fact that I arrived in a car and the rest of them was on a bus. Now with all the diplomats I knew when they were students in Paris, and with my connection in Dakar, even the beggars know me by first name. You think I can't get a car in Dakar? So it's nothing extraordinary for me to arrive at the assembly in a car. His number one lady, a Mexican, in shorts, very beautiful decorative shorts. But the Africans don't like women in shorts, period. With her camera taking the pictures of the legislative conference, no permission, and the pictures of all the people attending the conference. We don't know what she's going to do with those pictures. Karinga telling her what pictures to take, make sure she don't miss nobody. Now Karinga has a catalog of everybody who attended that conference, but no permission. His Hussein is a poor rewrite of ancient African talk text. This man had never accounted to us for this betrayal. He writes a mission statement. Now, if Farrakhan had stood before that audience and just said, I want to call your attention to a 19th century messenger who spoke better than I have ever spoken or maybe ever will, and just read David Walker's appeal and sit down, that have been enough. For David Walker said more than Farrakhan ever has said or ever will say. Have he called attention to Chancellor Williams' message at the end of his book, The Destruction of Black Civilization, his master plan? That would have been enough. Or Sheikh Anta Diop's message for economic salvation in a little book called Black Africa, the Politics of a Federated State. That would have been enough. We have had great messengers. And we come down now and glorify fakers, women mutilators, liars, people who ridicule us about our color. We make them millionaires, give them stretch limousines, and they spit on us.
That's right.
I'm saying that we have to reward true and honest leadership. I do not believe that any program for African people can afford to leave out Pan-Africanism, African world nationalism, and the values of a traditional African society, because if you search the values of a traditional African society, they had socialism not only before Karl Marx was born, but before Europe was born. And if Karl Marx said this was primitive, Karl Marx was a liar and a mistaken, misguided European. It was not primitive. It worked. It worked because they built societies that had no word for jail because no one had ever gone to one. They built societies that had no social agencies because no one needed one. In a meeting, 10 or more, 3 or more of African people, if Africa is not brought into proper focus in relationship to the African people of the world, the meeting is out of order. And any meeting that accepts us as a minority is out of order. When you take all of the African people in the Western world, all of the African people in the Pacific, 100 million African people in India, 750 million African people in Africa, we number 1 billion people on the face of this earth. Suppose we decided just to make our underwear. Look at the kind of factories we'd have to open overnight. Just underwear. Then next let's start to make our shoes. We can employ 2/3 of our people just taking care of each other. All we have to do is to turn to each other. Look in the mirror and find a partner. See who's staring back at you. We can discard the Farrakhans, the Karingas, other fakers, believe in ourselves. And let us understand that the Baptists alone take in more money than 7 European nations. You haven't asked what happened to this money. We have failed to demand accountability. We have to do this. We can make a revolution. Prepare your own home. I'm saying move like a nation. Think like a nation. And supply for yourself everything that goes into the making of a nation. I see no future in capitalism. I've fought it all my life, and I don't even have to argue this point. I see no future for capitalism in Africa. You go to Washington, appeal into corporations, and the corporations got their seed money from the slave trade. It's too much of a contradiction. You big enough, build your own corporation. Build your own corporation devoted to your own needs. And not a corporation bleeding people dry. Building a corporation and develop a society based on socialistic values is not incompatible. And yet I think there's a form of nationalism that is wasting our time. There's a form of nationalism essential to our existence. I'm not too clear what a cultural nationalist is. Most people you call narrow nationalists, I just call nationalist parasites and fools. Just hustlers, con men. I will end this by saying that there is no future for African people except some corporation for themselves, and our own salvation must come first. I'm saying you can give the world a new humanity. I do not think you can exist in this world out of context with the rest of the world. I think you should need form of partnership, not only with the white working class, but with all the working classes of the world. I do not think that any working class of any country or culture can exist and abstain from some concern for the other working classes of the world. I see no hope for capitalism except a new form of fascism, more ruthless than anything we've seen before. Let's go back to atonement and let's start. What are we atoning for? Let's have some understanding about it. If you read Sheikh Anta Diop's The Culture, Unity of Black Africa, there was no white beating in Africa. There was no female disrespect in Africa. We were drafted against our will into a society that had fear of women. We had no fear of women in African society. We knew she was the life giver. In most African societies, men rose each morning and prostrated themselves at the door of their mother and did not rise until she said, "Accept my blessings, precious fruit of my womb." These same men who paid this kind of respect to their mother turned out to be the fiercest warriors Africa ever knew. So there's strength in paying respect to the woman that gave you birth. We had no confusion about this. We developed this confusion away from home. You would never beat up no woman in Africa. You might do it now because Africans are confused now. When you married someone in Africa, you married her family and she married yours. If you want to deal with 50 cousins, 100 uncles, if you can deal with all of that, then go ahead. Then we came out of a collective society. We have forgotten what made Africa great before foreigners threatened their greatness. High morality and collective discipline. Somehow we have to find the road that leads us back to that Africa. Thank you very much.
ThomA alliance and plan for easy victories. Thank you, John Henrik Clarke. I guess we can move to the question and answer period right now, for those of you who might have some questions. You know, this kind of, you're going to set up a mic out here? Want some water? Okay. John Henrik Clarke will be back in just a moment. But, this kind of discussion is one that needs to go on. It used to go on all the time in our community when we had individuals around like W.E.B. Du Bois. Malcolm made most of his reputation, and he got better known because of debates, and he was willing to debate anyone about any subject, particularly around the subject of the liberation of black people. So I think that we have to look at it in that light, that we need to bring up some serious questions and analyze what it is that we're going through, what it is we're in the midst of, so that we can come up with some answers and move forward. There's still some questions that need to be raised. I'm hoping that in the future the Nation of Islam would be open to coming out and not assuming that every question that's raised is an attack on the nation. That we all have questions that we need to wind up working out so we can all be on the same page, so we can move forward. So I hope that in the future they will be willing to come out and engage in those kinds of discussions. So I guess they're going to set up a mic over here. Okay. I guess they're going to set up a mic, so if you have any questions, John Henrik Clarke will be back in just a moment. So if you have a question for him, you can hold on to that. It's like a puzzle. I don't know what happened to your trees. She must be the place making a sandwich. Maybe I beat her up so bad in that music contest that she so crowded that you had a tendency to go and try and find someplace that wasn't crowded. But it was a magnificent spectacle still to see all of those people come together without a single arrest, without anybody even hollering and screaming at each other. So please, if you do have some questions, would you come over to the microphone, and we'll do our best to to the mic.
I just wanted to ask a question. I go to these meetings and I keep hearing about capitalism and socialism, and we never really talk about how do we amass capital. Whether you're a socialist or a capitalist, you still need capital. So we're in the same 30, 40-year rhetoric. I've been living in this community and hearing this same recrimination. This one said this one did. It's all nonsense. We've got to begin to move on.
I don't know what the question was. It sounded more like a statement. But I think the purpose of what we're here for today, you talk about Huey Newton's dead and things. Obviously these issues haven't been resolved, because if they had been effectively resolved in a principled way, then Ron Karenga wouldn't have been the drafter of the mission statement. So these words are not about rhetoric. We talk about, well, what's the difference? Capitalism, we need to move on. With any movement, whether it's a social movement that we're talking about, if we're talking about in our personal lives, there has to be a moment in which there is some accounting, some accountability. And that's what we're talking about, because you talked about people being dead. That's true. There are certain people that are dead, but there were also reactionary forces that were allowed to actually gain prominence after the counterintelligence program effectively destroyed the black liberation movement in this country. And you know what they say? Those who do not learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. So, Farrakhan just didn't drop out of anywhere. He has a history. And this sort of like impatience with, involving and engaging in a critical analytical process is not going to help us to move forward in our struggle in a meaningful way. We have to learn from our mistakes of the past. When we're talking about capitalism, I don't care what you want to call it. I'm talking about an economic system which is based on the exploitation of the majority of people for the benefit of a few. We're living inside of a country where over 90% of the wealth is controlled by less than 5% of the population. How do we move beyond that reality? How do we do it? Do we just will ourselves into moving beyond it? And capitalism is about a certain relationship, a relationship of how you view people. I'm not a capitalist because black folks were the first capital in this country, okay? I'm not with any system that's based on the exploitation. So yeah, we got to start somewhere, and part of the starting point is analyzing. There has not been, as Dr. Clarke stated, any kind of atonement, any kind of day of reckoning. Why isn't Farrakhan here right now answering these very questions? He's not accountable to anybody. I'm sure Libya gave him another $5 or $10 million. How do we move forward when we're not going to talk? Dr. Clarke mentioned specific ways that we can begin to move on. We can begin to move on by taking control of our communities. But we can't be idealistic about how that process begins, because anytime we begin to get power, we're going to come up against political repression. You want to forget about brothers who right now, like Mumia Abu-Jamal, if it wasn't for people organizing, he would have been dead right now. Okay? So I'm not willing to forget those people who gave their lives for the community, whether you agree with their politics or not. I can't go on when I know, Herman Bell is sitting up right now, 23 hours keep locked, because he dared to protest a double bunking policy, and this brother gave his life for the black community. No, I cannot go on. He is with me every single day of my life, and I'm struggling to do the best that I can to help liberate people every day and make a contribution to my community.
I have a question. I would like to know your thoughts on this. And the question is basically a statement, and then you can give me your thoughts on that yourself and Professor Clarke. And the question goes as follows. I believe that the big question black people has to answer is not whether we are real men. That is not the question. The real question we have to deal with is what is the correct strategy to use to free us from oppression. I believe that we have been doing the wrong thing in going for self. And I have an example of that, and that is that, as many of us know about, during the 40s and early 50s, many of our people left the South in search of jobs. So what we had is that many men left the South in search of jobs, and they left their families in the South. Now, what we had then is a number of men in the North who were going for self and seeking a job, and then you had all these families in the South who were left basically unprotected because the men were in the North. So we have all these unprotected families in the South, men going for self in the North, and our oppressors, the racists, they were able to terrorize us in the South, and they were able to terrorize us in the North because each individual man was going for self and saying, well, I'm up here looking for a job in order to support my family, so therefore I cannot involve myself in any effort to protect the community from the racist whites who were in the North. So because of that situation, the racists were able to terrorize us in the South and terrorize us in the North, and right now we are faced with the situation that we are dealing with today. So I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
This is a situation, but I think you've dramatized it well, and you've also overstated it. But the basis for being terrorized is much bigger than that. we were going to be terrorized with or without the men, or with or without the change, with or without the migration. So the basis would have been some form of economic stability, where we would not have to relocate so often. We had something to do with where we were. We could have come south or go north. What's the reason? But we should not have had to go solely for economic reasons. The problem is, was then as it is now, we have no built-in securities that we can use, but we do not have to call on other people. And I've always said this is possible because if we built in a system of self-reliance, and there's so many jobs we can create among us that would take up some of the economic slack. And I'm not talking about becoming mass capitalists, but becoming a people who literally take care of their own. What I'm talking about is the form of internal socialism. Now, you may not understand what I'm talking about, but when I'm talking about a system of internal socialism, I'm talking about responsibility and the maintenance of the humanity of the whole group and caring. And I can use the word socialism and communism interchangeable because it exists long before the Europeans start using it. I'm talking about caring societies where each person got according to his needs. And I've seen it practiced among sharecroppers and worked out because very little money exchange between us. And I mean, growing up, we didn't have that money exchange. In fact, we ate very little out of a can. And we made our own cranberry sauce, own mayonnaise, own everything, own tobacco, everything. But we had to work it out between us in a barter society. That we created barter societies. If you make my corn, I'll make your shoes, and then I can't fight you. If I fight you, I couldn't get any shoes. You fight me, you can't get any corn. Had a whole lot of solutions first hand that other people are giving to us second hand.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen. Dr. Clarke, please help me as I go along. What I do is I'm working with two groups that are interested in the extended education of our children. And I'm dealing mainly with an Afrocentric aspect of it. And for example, when I first started classes, I would ask everyone what would they like to be. Sometimes I get good answers, sometimes I get no answers. About 6 months after the classes start, I go back and ask the same questions. And they will tell me exactly what it is they'd like to be when they leave college. Not high school, but college. One of the things that I do is say, look, if you want to be a doctor, go back to the man that they consider the father of medicine, who is Imhotep, and talk about how he ascended to be the physician for the king at the time, King Zosa. Also point out, if you want to be a builder, also be like Imhotep, because he's the one that built the first pyramid at Giza in honor of King Zosa. For the ladies, I have to deal with people like Hatshepsut and Queen Nzinga. Also, a lady by they call Queen Candace, who after Egypt had been, all the stuff that had been taken out of Egypt, the gentleman who did it, I can't remember his name right now, he went in and he wanted to get involved with doing the same thing to Ethiopia, and she amassed all of her forces and was able to stop him from even coming to the shores, and he ended up hightailing it and leaving.
What can name? There were several candles. Now name the one.
This one, she was the queen of Ethiopia at the time, and they don't know if her name was Candace or if Candace was actually the name meant queen.
All right.
But the guy who went into Egypt
You're talking about the one that stopped Octavius, who became Caesar Augustus.
No, not that one.
Which one are you talking about?
What was his name? Walter Raleigh, or one of them that went in and took all that stuff out of Egypt? The one that went into Egypt and took all the stuff out. I can't remember his name right now. His name escapes me.
Another candle.
Right. Anyway, what happened is, what I usually do is just point out some of these great figures and even tell them that astrology, for example, the lady who comes out on mornings, he could never remember her name. Show them how back in 1799, they actually dynamited the astrological signs out of the building of Egypt and brought it into Europe and claimed it as theirs. And basically what I'm saying is just make the African connection with everything that we do for a living today and show them that it actually came out of Africa. And they basically start seeing themselves more as African and stop considering themselves African Americans, but just to be Africans. They respond to, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right track?
You're on the right track. I think you got your chronology a little mixed up because it was talking about the last of the Candaces. These Candaces, the one that challenged Octavius, was concurrent with the period of Cleopatra. And that's early. That's the period approaching the AD period, like 39, 40 BC, approaching the AD period.
I need it like this.
The word Candace means queen. And see, the real Ethiopia gave birth to the country called Egypt. In fact, Ethiopia is the parent of Egypt. And too much emphasis has been placed on Egypt. Not enough emphasis has been placed on the southern African origins of Egypt. I wish people would read a whole book on Africa and just start reading a few pages and confusing me. I'm a history teacher, I can tell how much you read when you talk. You need to read a little more. Read Dr. Ben, Black Man of the Nile, and his family, and I did an essay for the baseline essay for the Portland Public Schools. I did a very extensive chronology of the dynasties of Egypt. And Asa Hilliard did the same thing, a little more extensive. This information is so interesting and so available, there's no reason why we shouldn't have it in whole other pieces. Because when you throw it at me in pieces, it confuses me and tells me what you still have to read. But thanks for the effort, anyway. Okay.
First of all, I'd like to commend everyone for coming in because it shows that...
I'm not hearing you.
First of all, I'd like to commend everyone for coming in here today. It shows that, just as in the Million Man March, that there needs to be changes made. But the problem is that the problem that we're having and the problem that everyone has been having in this struggle for this common goal is that you're sleeping, meaning not awake. You're not realizing what is happening before your very eyes because your anger is misguiding you. You have to let go of the anger because it keeps a mental block on your brain to realize what is happening before your very eyes. Because it's going to take me a couple minutes. I'm sure you guys are going to appreciate this.
because I've descended here to this planet to come talk to you. Because as I sit and contemplate my circle of existence, my persistence will overcome all resistance. For instance, I've reached other levels of consciousness many cannot perceive. And I've come about a realization that my people are being deceived. What was that supposed to mean, sir? No. You see the problem is we're fighting amongst each other. If you will give me time, I could explain to you what I want to do here. Could I speak, please? Could I please speak? Because no one here has done nothing.
Okay, this is a question and answer period. If you would make that kind of short, since there are some people that...
All right, okay, I'm not going to go into this since you people are still so anxious and you don't realize what's going on. Okay, no problem.
It was because we haven't listened. Every time he tells us to do something, we don't listen. Can I just ask him to suggest maybe one more thing for the people that are tired of the rhetoric? Because obviously the need for the continued rhetoric is because we haven't listened.
No, I maintain that had the traditional black leadership done the job expected of them they were supposed to do, there'd been no necessity for the Million Man March. Not that I think the Million Man March had a legitimate necessity other than Farrakhan's ego anyway. But had Dorothy Height with almost 1 million women at her disposal and Pretty Jessie with still a following, had they taken care of their constituency the way they should have, the people would not have been listening to Farrakhan. That it was an Islamic game, and
okay, my question, Dr. Clarke, is given that a lot of African people in America have been really hurt by integration in a lot of ways, do you see the kind of socialist economy that you talk about being able to be accomplished in where black people are so spread out, or do you think that there's a certain separatist type agenda that we'd have to pursue?
I think starting with our family and with our community, there is a possibility of that economy without dogma. Once dogma into it, it starts confusion, because dogma generally comes from outside of our community. I think we could have turned Christianity into a form of socialism had we not bought a whole lot of white dogma and a whole lot of white images. Because Christianity probably looked at is socialistic. But we won't listen to ourselves well enough to understand that.
I'm not trying to waste your time here. There is something I wish that was said at the rally. I wish somebody had said to the men that were assembled there, for every one of us that are assembled here, there is one of us in prison. Just so you sort of get a feel for what's happening here. For every person you see in this picture, there is a brother or a sister in prison right now. And I wish somebody had said that at the rally.
Well, so do I, and I have no argument with that.
All y'all
Thank you, Dr. Clarke. Thank you. Thanks to the panel. So to ask, perhaps, I think for many people who went to the march, this is just a brief statement, that the reasons for going was a kind of desperate need for reassurance that our brothers really weren't our enemies, that our brothers in fact could be our brothers and our friends and our lovers and our family members and people who, when we're in need, we could turn to them. Perhaps no one else in America, black or white, could have made that many men come. I certainly don't think of many people in activist movements generally who could have gotten 1 million men to Washington. Perhaps there was something about the coalition that was brought together which was able to do that. And again, if not, then in large part I think by this desperation a lot of people went who felt they had to go just to be there with other men to in a public show of goodwill. And of course in brotherhood. I just want to ask though to everybody on the panel, do we have to destroy capitalism, behead Karenga, destroy Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, to move positively on the community level, to give us some ideas, just some simple ideas as to how we can trust our friends, our family, our brother, and use our resources in small ways so that our victories can be more focused towards our real efforts, what we need to do immediately to relieve the pressure that we're feeling.
No, we do not have to destroy them. We have to bring them effectively under control and tone down their effectiveness and let them either speak for the collective or stand on the sidelines. Go ahead.
I mean, once again, I feel like, anyone who speaks out and just raises some issues that I think should be of concern to the community, that we have to place ourselves in some sort of defensive posture. I don't think that anybody here is suggesting that we need to behead Karenga, but I think that, as Dr. Clarke said, as has been, stated in other forums, that we need to hold him and Farrakhan accountable. If we don't have an open discussion, for example, about the millions, the multi-millions that were raised around this march, and that question isn't even put forth, whether it's through kickbacks through bus companies, whether it's from vendors, whether it's from the $50 that's now being asked for the videotape, if we don't begin to say, hey, what about that money? And where is it going to be, where is it going to go? You asked, which comes first? Do we have to destroy capitalism? No, I think that, many people in this room are activists in small ways. Like Dr. Clarke said, it starts with family. It starts with self. It moves out into community. That is the beginning of something. For me, the ultimate goal, though, is the destruction of capitalism, because I don't think it is a viable economic system that takes into account the needs of the people. But there isn't any really meaningful discussion going on right now about who are these individuals. And I think we do ourselves a disservice. If we say that we love Malcolm, then how can we allow someone or an organization which admitted to the execution of that individual, participating in the assassination and creating the environment that made his assassination possible, how do we let that just go by without speaking of it, without holding people accountable? So to me, it's all about dialogue, it's all about clarification and how best to move forward. It's about what kind of organizations do we want to form? What sort of role will women play in the movement? I mean, to me, that's the whole purpose of conversation, is to grow and to learn from our mistakes and to move forward.
All right, I just have a brief follow-up here. I agree with you that we do need to do that. There are many people, however, that over the years we have come to reconcile our differences with, not because we want to embellish that person's reputation, but because for the common good of everybody. Of course, we saw on a global level what happened in South Africa, where some of the vilest people, for the sake of reconciliation and moving forward and addressing the need of the thirst, the hunger of the community, that people have come to reconcile the differences. I'm saying that this kind of discussion about who these folks are ought to be taken somewhere else, because I think that what people ask, what we are asking for is, listen, the public schools are messed up. How can we raise some money on the block in the church, so that these kids can get a better quality kind of education? How can we do that and I'm not making this, this is not brain surgery. Communities do it all the time. It's done all the time. I'm just saying that that's something else. But what I'd like to simply address briefly, if I could finish briefly, that there was an opportunity missed, I think, maybe because of the way the march was organized, for people such as yourselves not to have become involved in its organizing. I think there's an opportunity there that was missed on both sides. I think with enough participation then, and even now that for the better good of people, we the people, not the activists or the leadership, but for we the people, we want to see some moral leadership rise from all this and say, okay, look, we can put this behind us and move forward. Can somebody address that or not? Bernard?
Well, I think it's an error to separate the people that are up here from the people that are out there. I think that that's an error. I think that this
concerning questions of fault that are in the leadership of the people who led the Million Man March. I am saying that I don't know how many people's sons, family, I don't think there's anybody here who has a problem who disagreed with the march or what it accomplished. I know it. Okay. All right. But then I can speak personally because I think there are a million personalities there. I thought you were. Then because I want to say there are a million people there. And, well, Bernard, the discussion that I think ought to be held behind in a different place is this ad hominem attack. Is the ad hominem attack? Is that kind of vituperative attack on the characters of people who we will have differences and we'll have agreements with? I'm not trying to say that I'm not trying to stifle the discussion. I'm saying that we want something else, okay. But not the attack on people. That can happen.
Okay, I think you're making another assumption again about the we. I think that this meeting was called for a specific purpose. That it wasn't an ad hominem attack, as you put it. I think that a lot of people don't know who these players are, and that there's some questions that need to be raised, need to be looked at. If folks are called together again. I think the question of money, where's that money going? I think the question of vision, that has to be done. I happen to be one that thinks that the march was premature. I think the march comes after you do the work in the community to bring people together and celebrate what you've done. They brought people together to do what? Primarily, a lot of money was made and no accounting was done for it. And I think some of the questions that were raised here are the kinds of questions that need to be raised if we're going to really understand what it is that happened on October 16th.
Yeah, I want to go on to the next speaker, but I really have a problem with what you just said, Jerry, for a number of reasons. First of all, I just stated in my presentation that people were involved from the very beginning, raising issues up, because part of the criticism, we have to remember this march was organized over a year ago, and it was not open to people to participate. It was basically a nation event. The way it got opened up was through people struggling and criticism and forcing them to open it up. But the nation is not a democratic organization. Let's not forget that. However, once it became opened up, what we struggled for is we were told, bring your criticisms, bring your concerns. Like I said, I was in a meeting where I talked to Comrade Muhammad myself. And I raised criticism about the role of women, for one thing. Because I do have a problem with a march, not with brothers bonding with each other, not with them coming together and trying to fight against, I mean, in the one hand, it's like I said, there's this stereotype of the black man as criminal, as we don't help each other, that we don't support each other, but a lot of us don't feel that way and have a different experience of the black man. So the extent to which we bought into that hype, and that's racist stereotype of black men, a lot of brothers felt the need to come together and say, no, we're not about that, we're about something positive. And I'm not saying that I have a problem with that, but what I'm saying is that participation around the question of political prisoners. We were told that political prisoners would be included in a meaningful way. Now you can't look back and say the political prisoners were meaningfully included, because they weren't. They were excluded and they were marginalized, despite the fact that we were told that they would be given some prominence. Instead, we had a 2+ hour presentation by Farrakhan where we heard about how tall the monument was, and if you put a 1 in front of it, then we come up with the year in which the slave trade started, and all of that was what a lot of the, it was, and for some people that appeals, but we're talking about concrete solutions to the problem. So I'm saying that some of the criticism, and the other issue is when are we, in a meaningful way, going to address the question of black enemies of black people? When? Are we ever going to address that? Or are we going to tippy-toe around that and just have some sort of like unprincipled unity based on color alone? There are black enemies and class enemies of black people, and we need to deal with that. This might not be the time, but it is a serious question that needs to be dealt with. Right.
I'd like to just follow up on what the sister was saying. I think that's correct. We're all black, number one. And depending on perspective, depending on whether you're an enemy or not. Okay, if basically I came here to see or to discuss where we're going from here. We have different ideologies, there were different people on the platform speaking. I myself personally attended the march, and I think it was a good thing. I think that you can't separate the messenger, Farrakhan, from the march, because I don't believe that there's any other black person at this point in time that could have brought 1 million people together. I'm not saying he's a god or he's this or that, but I just think you need to recognize the significance of the man. Okay? Not the demeanor, what she was saying, but I think we should come together and recognize the significance of each other as a people. And once that happens, then we can move forward. If we keep pointing fingers, we're not moving anywhere. I mean, and as far as political prisoners, I've heard on numerous occasions the nation, Farrakhan, talking about political prisoners. Now, if we got our feelings hurt that it wasn't expressed at that platform, I think we should be bigger than that. I really do, because you really can't address the plight of black people in 2.5 hours or in one day. It goes so deep. And I respect the panelists, I respect Dr. Clarke, I respect the sister, and I'm just glad to be here. And what I think the march did do was bring us together and hopefully start dialogue and not point fingers. It's not necessary, because they can point fingers at you, and then where are we going? We're in the same rut that we were in. My father was in, my grandfather was in, and we haven't gained any progress. We can look outside and see we haven't gained progress. So where do we go from here? That's the key. Dr. Clarke, I'm a good friend of Gil Noble's. I know you're fond of him. I grew up with his family. And I'm just kind of curious to see what like it is going to be tomorrow, and what view and what aspect it'll take.
Look, I respect the brother's opinion, but on the Liberation March, I reserve the right to know who's in front of me and who's behind me. And
about slavery from the past.
I'm saying slavery. I was in the slave trade before Islam.
He's a traditional slave trader. There's still slavery going on in Mauritania and the Sudan, and I've got documents. I brought back a PhD thesis 2 weeks ago. I was in London 2 weeks ago seeing some of the victims of slave trade in Mauritania and in the Sudan.
Okay. For the young people who sit here and you want to idolize what's happening, let's tell you what happened in London or in Manchester. There were people on that stage who read to us documents about the Arabs and Islam plan to Islamize all of Africa. This is not a joke. You may sit here and idealize and do not know that you're really in a global village. And what's planned for us, you better deal with it. The first people who congratulated Farrakhan on that march was Gaddafi and the man in Iran. Now, whether you want to read into it history or not, history's happening to us right now. The people in that room who stood up and told us the amount of people they lost in the Sudan, families, members, women, children, the mutilation of children being made eunuchs in Sudan. It is real, my brothers and sisters. Be very aware that you're not living in America alone, that this is global, and for us, Africa is the last reserve. If you don't want to believe it, then you will live it, and you will regret it.
I just want to say that black people who take the position that we should have unity for the sake of unity, I think that is totally outrageous. I think that is one of the problems that's been going on. When you look around this room here, there are young people in here that wasn't even born when some of the crimes that Correa has committed against other black people. Right on. And because there's a void in black leadership in this country, certain leaders, so-called leaders, have wormed their way into position. You need to understand history. You need to know what Correa was about. You need to know what Farrakhan's about. And I don't think we belabor the point of talking about Farrakhan, because we've got young people out there who don't necessarily know about Farrakhan's history or know about Ron Karenga's history. Let me tell you a little story about Ron. I'm going to be very brief because there's some other things I want to say. He took, in 1968, he took a garden hose, a water hose, and stuck it up a woman's vagina, a young girl, and blew her up and killed her. He informed against the Black Panther Party members in Los Angeles when Black Panthers was patrolling the streets in L.A. The Los Angeles police cops used to take the Panthers' gun from them and let us keep their guns. You don't even have a clue to what this man was about. You don't even have a clue to what Farrakhan was about. In terms of what the sister was talking about, political prisoners in jail today that's rotting in jail, it's amazing, but I understand it to some extent. This is not taking anything away from Nelson Mandela, but we came out into the streets in millions across this country. We got political prisoners who are rotting away in jail today, and we can't get 25 of you in a hall. That's a damn shame. And Farrakhan should have spoken more about political prisoners. We got Albert Washington. She talked about Herman Bell. We got Geronimo Pratt. And there are women who are locked up that we don't even talk about. Right. We can't even get you out there for that. So they would be derelict in their duties if they didn't expose these people to you. When you have a shop and who wore what for the FBI. When you have all of these so-called leaders running around that has legitimacy now. The other thing about the Million Man March, it was a missed opportunity, because those of you who are down in Washington, D.C., you have nothing in your community to come back and tie into. There was nothing concrete you can do in the community. That was a field goal, it was an inspirational thing. That's all Washington was about. You got on the bus and you went home and you came back to your community and you come to forums like this and you say, what can we do? Yeah. What can we do? That should have been thought about ahead of time. If it wasn't for the money, it should have been thought about in terms of the drugs within our community, infant mortality rate in Harlem, Beverly Establishment, and Brownsville. There are some things we can do as a people that don't cost money. We can start escort service, escort some of the elders from the subways at night who are afraid to walk the street. We can close down drug houses in our community, and we organize to do that. That don't cost no money, just a little manpower. Yeah. Those are the things that we can do. There's a lot of things that we can do in the black community, but for you to come up here and say, let bygones be bygones, I said, the hell with this spacious reason. That's outrageous.
We all have atone.
You cannot atone. Listen, my brother, I'm not gonna get off on this review. Well, I'm speaking to the overall people here. There are many things you can do. You can get involved behind your political prisons. You can get involved in terms of your community. You can deal with drugs within your communities. You can close those houses down. You can take people to stop some of the violence that's going on in our communities and whatnot. These are some things that we can do. They are concrete things. But please don't ever close your ear in terms of the hypocrisy, in terms of some of these leaders that's out here in the streets out here. Because what's going to happen is you'll have other people following those people, and we'll be here 5 or 10 years from now, those of us that's alive, trying to tell you, don't deal with those people and whatnot. If Farrakhan can get 16,000 men in the Harlem Armory, and you would think that's impressive, and you say no one else can do it, but what organizations did they join afterwards? They went back to work. They went back to, it was a feel-good meeting, that's all. They were frustrated. They came out and they heard he raved about the crackers and whatnot and how we are oppressed, but he offered no solutions to that. You should ask about some solutions. That's what we should be talking about. We should expose people and we should offer some solutions. Some of the solutions are, and some of the solutions that you can do, I just offer you solutions, brother. You can organize the people closing down some crack houses. You can organize some people. You can organize some people to escort some of the elders, people that work at night that's afraid to work. You can stop some of the violence in the community. You can do these things and whatnot. But what I'm saying to you is simply this, is that when they left out of D.C., they had organizing committees around the country. Those organizing committees are not intact. They're not talking about ongoing work. If you get $1 billion anything together, you should have a program where it's going to be continuing going on. What happened to the money? That's a legitimate question. What is going to happen to the money? Who has a say in this?
They went to voter registration.
Listen, please, don't close your ear to constructive criticism to some of these idiots that's running around out here in the streets and whatnot. Please don't do that.
Why won't they do it? Because they're afraid of dying.
Okay, you heard me. Okay, we got just up to the brother in the back, Ulysses, and then we're going to stop the questioning. Also want to remind you to tune in to BAI on Monday. Is that Monday? Monday from 3 to 5. There's going to be some talk about slavery today in the Sudan and Mauritania because it's happening today.
Just wanted to ask a quick question. Because of all the Million Man March and the OJ trial before that, I haven't heard a lot about Mumia Abu-Jamal. I just wanted to kind of get an update, some feedback on what's happening with his case. And another thing, I was wondering, Johnny Cochran just recently this week came out and said he was going to represent Tupac Shakur. And I was wondering why he didn't get a calling to represent Mumia, because I think he certainly could have done something on his case. Or is he just another poser?
Well, first of all, in terms of Mumia, as everybody knows, there was a struggle waged to get him a new trial, and he lost that before Judge Sabo. So where it is now, it's being appealed, and it will, I think the court date is scheduled for December. For those people that don't know, there's a major demonstration being planned in Philly on November 6th, Black Solidarity Day. If you're interested in going down, you could, see me or some other folks. The other issue that was pending with him was his treatment in prison while incarcerated, the conditions of his confinement, which did not allow people who had been functioning as part of his legal team, like Pam Africa and other people who had quote-unquote criminal histories, Pam in particular from her involvement in, with the MOVE organization, one of the longest held political prisoners in the United States, and he said now that he's off the OJ trial, he will concentrate his energies on that case, trying to get him released from prison.
I want to thank the panelists. Make one small comment about pointing fingers. I think we do need to know who we're working with at all times, because that was what led to the downfall of so many movements. I think that was the origin of that phrase, fox in the chicken house. We have to be sure we know who we're dealing with. so that they don't in turn turn us in or cause the movement to disintegrate. Another thing is a few questions. I know, Dr. Clarke, I've heard you speak about when you first came to Harlem, there were political clubs and places you could go to interact with people of like minds where you could have philosophical discourse. I was wondering, was there any kind, I'm not familiar with a whole lot of clubs or organizations like that. That one question. If there are, I'd like to be made aware of it, or maybe you can make these people aware of. Number two, about the, I heard people talk about public education, talking about, I want to know, is it necessary that we separate, or is there some way that we can enforce our own particular curriculum in the public schools, since they are public, and we do we constitute the majority of the people in that system? Is there any way that we can control that and give our young people relevant education? Another thing is the black press relevant today? Do they have any legitimacy, or are they responsible for informing us to a certain degree that we might know what's going on? And that's enough. I'll just sit and wait for the answer to those. Thank you.
The only group in Harlem right now that meets on those bases and where there's a dialogue is the First World Lecture Group. It meets at St. James Presbyterian Church, 141st Street and St. Nicholas Avenue. Meet every Saturday at 4. The kind of groups that I talked about when I was growing up intellectually in Harlem in the 30s and 40s, they don't have those groups now, because I belonged to the old Harlem History Club at the time, the Modern Trend Club, that was the Yoruba Debating Society and the Dunbar Debating Society. We could talk and disagree with each other and still loved each other then. Now if you disagree with people, they want to kill you. And I'm sorry, that kind of atmosphere don't exist in Harlem anymore. And during the Italian-Ethiopian War, we could debate both sides and still be friends. We had that great group of Caribbean activists, Richard Moore and Cyphers and J.A. Rogers, along with the African-American activists. We don't have any of those anymore. As for the public school, to deal with the public school and forcing change, you've got to deal with the teachers and have to deal with the black teachers as well as the whites, because some of the black teachers are just as backward and just as reluctant to change as some of the whites, and some of them spend more time explaining how dumb the children are other than teaching them. There was a third question about whether the black press can be relevant, but the black press used to be a creative imitation of the white press. They're no longer a creative imitation. In fact, there's poor carbon copy, and they don't take any strong principle stands anymore. The paper called the Black American or the New American used to, when Offutt was alive, and the City Sun occasionally, the Amsterdam once in a while. But the creative black press is no more. I think we can sparkle some energy into them. We're more responsible than they are, because they think they're not going to get white advertisers if they become dynamic. If the white advertisers get customers, they don't care too much about the content of the paper. Not really. All they want is sell their Frigidaires and whatever they're trying to advertise. They don't pay that much attention to what else is in the paper anyway.
Hello, my name is Caroline, and I've lived in the Midwest all of my life, and I just moved to New Jersey a couple weeks ago, and I stumbled on the WBAI, and that's how I ended up here today. The question I'd like to ask is, I've appreciated everything that both of you have said, and I also appreciate the fact that there are lots of books out there that people can read that really have the answers to what we need to do in order to liberate ourselves. But I think what happens every time there's a meeting like this that's in response to generally a media event is that lots of well-meaning people turn out, but when they leave, they don't have anything that they can take with them that they can then use to build upon. And I guess what I'm wondering from you is whether or not I would hate for this to be another missed opportunity, because I think this is something really special. I don't think it takes 1 million people to do the work that we need to do, and I suspect that most of what we need to do is going to happen in small groups, and I fully expect that there are lots of black people who are doing the things that they need to do in terms of taking care of their families and supporting people in their neighborhoods. But at the same time, the whole concept of nation building, the whole concept of collectively working together is something that we don't really see happening, and I'm not really aware of where that's happening, where people are really practicing African principles and working with children throughout the neighborhood, where a number of the principles of nation building are happening. And I'm wondering if in this gathering an opportunity has not been missed to lay out some of those principles in a more strategic fashion, so that people can leave here with something in their hands that they can share with their friends and their family members. And if after these meetings, why isn't there a plan for another meeting, or not necessarily a meeting, a work session, to build upon some of the issues that have been raised here, whether it's political prisoners or whether it's kids in public schools who are failing and there's nobody there to hold the teachers and the administration and other government officials accountable. Whatever the issues and the enthusiasm and the interest that has been demonstrated by people coming here and sitting through several hours is somehow lost, and it just kind of dissipates and it's not built upon. So I'm sorry, I know that was a long introduction to a question, but I've been to a lot of meetings like this where people have really wanted to do something different, and they've been credible people, and they've been honest people, and they've been trustworthy people, but we get together and we talk, and then everybody goes home, and nothing is built from that event. So that's the question.
I have no argument about what you're saying, and these things are being done not as well as they should be, but some people are functioning in the manner that you're prescribed, just not enough. And it just so happened we were brought here to discuss some specific things, and that wasn't exactly part of the agenda. We could have, if that was part of the agenda that brought us here, but we're limited in how much time we had to take. But we're not unaware of any of the things that you said, and in some way we are both participants in that kind of process.
Sister, I appreciate your comments. I have often felt the same way attending public forums like this. You get a lot of information and you always wonder, well, now what? Before I came here today, I was at a meeting of the organization that I'm a part of, which I stated earlier is the Campaign to Free Black and New African Political Prisoners. And I think that what all of us face as we try to do organizing work is, number one, where do we concentrate our energies? For those of us who are working, unlike in the 60s where, when my husband was in the Black Panther Party, they lived, ate, drank, slept the Black Panther Party. And in large part that was possible because they had the resources, both in terms of human resources and material resources, to be able to do that work on a full-time basis. Now, part of what's happened in the 70s and the 80s is, first of all, very much those generations were the me generations, and we don't have like a comprehensive sense of how to tackle all the issues that are facing our community. So you got some people doing AIDS work, you got other people dealing with housing issues, you got other people dealing with health issues. I think the biggest thing that all of us face right now is how to get Giuliani out of office and Pataki. That should be our goal right here in New York. And in terms of voter registration jobs, I believe that we need to start organizing right now for how we're going to make that happen, to identify a candidate that we think is going to address our needs in our community. As Dr. Clarke said, there are many people who are part of organizations, and it's hard. You're working full time, you come home after work, if you got kids, you got to try to deal with them, and then you got to try to fit your political work in on top of all that. So it's a major challenge. If people are interested in political prisoner work, I'm here. There's also people here from the Black Panther newspaper committee who are here who do work around political prisoners. That is one area in which we're focusing our attention. However, in dealing with political prisoners, we also say that those prisoners came out of a movement for social change that resulted in them becoming prisoners. So I don't think I have to take issue with what the brother said about this is my pet issue. I don't believe that a movement that does not support its freedom fighters and people don't support their freedom fighters can ever hope to achieve meaningful liberation. In South Africa, the South African people never allowed the masses in the world to forget about Nelson Mandela and their political prisoners, okay? And so we understand that COINTELPRO created a vacuum, and in that vacuum, opportunist individuals emerged. It is hey, you're right, brother, everybody atones. I did not hear Karenga atone for the atrocities that he has committed. I didn't hear it at the march. I haven't heard it yet. And if he has atoned, I still say to him, to Sharpton, and to Farrakhan, your role in the movement should not be one of leadership. We need to hold you accountable to some standards. Let's see over time whether or not you're true to those standards. And if in fact you prove to be true, then perhaps you can then emerge from a position of leadership. If I got abused by someone, I'm not going to just pretend. If somebody killed my mother, okay, or kill my father, or kill Malcolm X, no, I'm not. One year you can't come out with a video talking about how, that's right, I helped to create the atmosphere to kill Malcolm, and I'm not going to apologize. And next year, you make atonements through, Kabila Shabazz, and you hand the mother some money, and then all's forgotten. It doesn't work like that. So all we're trying to say is there's got to be a process and a mechanism for us to hold individuals accountable. And that's what I thought that this was the beginning of, to raise some of the issues. But I agree. If it's all about talk and it's not walking the walk, then what are we doing? Wasting our time? We just up here, gabbing. There are a lot of people in this room who are activists. And we need to build organization, and we need to figure out how to concentrate our energy.
Good afternoon. I'd like to figure out what you just said. One of the things in fighting a revolution, we need to have a revolution within a revolution first before you can confront the true enemies. That's one thing you need to expose these guys. And one thing that bothered me of Farrakhan's speech in the Million Man's March was his duplicity, his double language in the speech, which I found very sinister. When he said, I'm not a racist, I'm not an anti-Semite. Why must he defend himself to a captive black audience? At the same time, talking to white people, I found it very sinister. I was really troubled by that. That's all I have to say.
Okay, that was the last question. We brought Daniels. That would be fair because I think some other people.
No, just one. It's mine. It's a small question. John, you were talking.
Small question?
Yes. Dr. Clarke wants to respond to that.
Okay, go ahead.
No, go respond. We got to respond. Dr. Clarke want to respond to that.
Am I right? Yeah. Now, I would like for you to tell me, the Nat Turner automatics. What do you think of him? Both of y'all can answer that for me.
Well, look, Alton Maddox is my personal friend, and I love him, and I protect him, and I support him. But I don't put him in the category of world leader. I place him in good as community leader, and he's a good national leader, but he had not risen to the status of world leader.
Okay, that's what I want to hear. Because I see him in the struggle, and he called all these bus trips to go to support Abu Jamal, right? And I never see the Nation of Islam, I'm there. None of that rest we struggle. But I never claim him now, but I never hear them giving Maddox a lot of credit for keeping the fight going.
Look, I'm not lacking in my respect for Alton Maddox.
No, I'm not saying that.
But I answered the question based on how the question was worded.
No, just one thing. The question keeps coming up around the Nation of Islam and their support of political prisoners. And it's true within the last year, because they were criticized that they've given more coverage to the issue of political prisoners. But one of the questions that we raised with Louis Farrakhan and the nation was, if you can march 1 million men to Washington, can you send 10,000 down to Philadelphia to save the life of Mumia Abu Jamal? And he did not do it. He did not do it, and he said he would. He also said that he would make a financial contribution given the overwhelming legal costs that the team was facing. He did not do that, and he said that he would. No, I'm just saying the status is that there's ongoing struggle with him. I don't feel that we need to convince Ben Chavis, who himself was a political prisoner, that of the need to support political prisoners. Okay? So there's a lot of, like I said, issues and struggle that we've been engaged with these folks for over like 5 years, and it has not manifested itself in any kind of meaningful or concrete support. And this goes back to a question that Dr. Clarke raised. You have to understand, a lot of the brothers that are in the joint who used to be in the Black Panther Party, they converted to Islam. But they are about a revolutionary Islam, and the nation does not support them because of that. They do stand in opposition to the Arabization of Islam and to the role it is playing in Islam. They don't support slavery in the Sudan or Mauritania. So I think that, we have to look at that difference even amongst Muslims and revolutionary Muslims and the role of the nation. Yeah, you're right, they're all different sets, but then we can't suspend our analytical abilities, and nor can we, for example, as a people, for some people, it might not be a problem if we have police informants leading on our movement. For some people, maybe that's not a primary contradiction. They don't see that as a big deal. For me, it is a big deal. For some people, it's not a big deal that, Farrakhan lives like a king in Chicago where black people are starving. Maybe to them that's not a contradiction, that he got however many stretched limousines and he lives in a palace. Some people feel like he's God and he deserves it. Well, if he deserves it, I say every black person deserves to live like that. And we're not talking, the other thing about Farrakhan and the nation is they did not just come up, brother, excuse me, they didn't just come out overnight. What I said, if we're going to talk about police brutality, why isn't the fruit of Islam protecting the black community against police brutality? They are not there in the community standing up. They have never inserted themselves in a meaningful way into our community. How come they're not in the community feeding the community, housing the community? And how on the one hand can we think that the nation presents a threat to the U.S. government while the U.S. government is giving them contracts? The U.S. government never gave the Black Panther Party contracts. And the other thing is, do y'all think that if Huey was alive today and called 1 million black men, women, and children to Washington, that the National Guard wouldn't have been called out? And if you think that it would have been called out, I want to ask y'all why. Because obviously the nation is not a threat to the status quo. It is not a threat. It is not a threat, and it never has been. But what I'm saying is, brother, what I'm saying, there is no, brother, let's not suspend our analysis. There is no other organization in the black community other than the black church, okay, that has access to the type of resources that the Nation of Islam does. No, wait. No, and I'm saying, how are those resources benefiting and improving the quality of life for everyday black folks? And if they're not, I got a problem with it. I got a problem. Maybe you don't.
Well, you know, one of the things you mentioned is that you were interested in what Gil Noble has to say about it. I think you ought to talk to him. You'll find that he might be a little bit closer to what's happening on the panel here than it is to your position. So, Ron Daniels couldn't make it today, but one of the things that Ron Daniels, in his platform when he ran for president, is he took from Fannie Lou Hamer, which said that we are the leaders we've been looking for. I think that we got to stop. One of the things we have to do is begin to see ourselves as leaders. If you think there's problems in your community, search out, find like-minded people, and begin to deal with those problems, not look for anybody else to lead you in what it is you have to do. The other thing is, this is the first of a three-part series. The next one will be November the 11th, which will deal with accountability and black leadership. David Du Bois, Julius Garvey, Paul Robeson Jr., Amiri Baraka will be here, and also there's going to be, on Black Solidarity Day, a day of education about Mumia Abu-Jamal and the death penalty, police brutality, police repression at the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Labor Center, 310 West 43rd.